First off, Happy New Year to you all. From your host from Medical Experts in Football, Tyro, I am just so excited to get my first episode of the year. I know it's been a little while, and let me admit that I am going to try my best to release podcast episodes when I can. But on top of balancing PT, journalism, trying to get fluent in Spanish, it's quite a bit much, but I love this podcast. And if you're tuning in for the first time, thanks so much for stopping by. And welcome to the podcast where we talk about soccer, sports medicine, and culture. So today's guest is a sports PT who worked for KC Current, which is a professional women's soccer team in the National Women's Soccer League in the United States. She now owns her own business, The Game Changer, in Kansas City, Kansas. So what did our talk include? We talked from Washington, not Washington, D.C., to Missouri, life working as a PT while splitting her clinic time with the KC Current, and certainly now what has been a new venture for her, being a new business owner. So hope you enjoyed, and make sure you give me a rating and give me your feedback at the very end. And here's Allison Davis. Well, Allison, first, I would like to thank you for hanging with me till 2024, because we've been communicating back and forth for a couple years. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think you first reached out in probably 2022, and it's just taken us a long time to get our schedules to match. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for hanging with me too.
Yes, yes. And so here we are. And I have actually not had an episode for a couple of months because I'm in the middle of certainly balancing out my journalism with my PT work. But then I'm also working on getting fluent in Spanish because I want to be a bilingual soccer and injury journalist. So
That's
a little
awesome.
busy. So we're excited to have our first guest for 2024. So Allison, I like to always open it up with a little bit of trivia. And so from my understanding, you are from Washington,
Yes, state of Washington.
state of Washington, not Washington, D.C. First question. Washington is a top producing state of which fruit?
Apples.
Nice. All right. And then secondly, what is the major company that was founded in a garage in Washington?
I think Microsoft, was that in a garage?
Starts with an A. Maybe Microsoft was, but
Oh, okay.
starts
Amazon.
with an
Yeah.
A. Amazon. Yes,
Okay.
Amazon here
Cool.
is a place where we can buy things online, and we often do that now. So, Allison, if one were to meet you for the first time, what would make you, in your own eyes, a Washington? Is it a Washingtonian?
That is, yes, Washingtonian. That is correct. Yes.
Yeah.
I think probably the biggest thing, especially I live in Kansas City now. And
Hmm.
so one of the things that I do is I really try to stay rooted in my, Pacific Northwest heritage.
Hmm.
And a lot of that comes from the sports teams that I will cheer for. So
Okay.
I will support Kansas City sports and Kansas City
Hmm.
teams as long as they aren't playing Seattle teams. Because
That's fair.
Seahawks, Mariners, the Storm, RIP, the Sonics,
Yeah.
even the Kraken now. I'm excited we have an NHL team up there, but
Oh, nice.
yes, so I will always cheer for them first, despite having lived in the Midwest here for over 10 years now. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, Washington is actually one state that Washington State is one state that I've always wanted to visit because it appears, or it seems that many people that go there, they say the scenery is beautiful. And you yourself seem like you're an outdoorsy. You like snowboarding, hiking, spending time outdoors.
mhm.
Set the scene for, is it Tacoma? Is Tacoma where you were actually from, or from a different city in Washington State?
Well, I was born in Seattle. I kind of grew up all
Yeah.
over the place, but I graduated from high school in Yakima, which is in like central eastern Washington,
Hmm.
which believe it or not, is actually the desert side of the state. So a
Oh.
lot of people don't know. They think Washington, they just think rain everywhere, but actually, once you get kind of over the Cascade Mountains and into central and eastern Washington,
Hmm.
It's really dry. It's that high desert climate. So yeah, totally
Okay.
different than Seattle or Tacoma, and those areas. So it's kind of fun that, yeah, if you want to go hiking in a rainforest, you can go to the Olympic Peninsula, or if you want to go
Hmm.
hiking in a desert, you can just go over to Eastern Washington and you're still in one state. So
Okay. Well, what's your favorite city in Washington State?
I love Seattle.
Seattle.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's that's my place. I love
That's your
Seattle.
place. What about Seattle?
I think that it's a city that has something for everyone. Yeah, I think that you can just do so much from that city. And I love that you can be sitting at sea level and you like turn around and look up, and then there's Mount Rainier, like 14,000 feet. Just, and you
Oh,
can see
wow.
almost all
The
14,000 feet of it
mountains.
because you're at sea level. So it's just,
Yeah,
yeah, the views there
that's
are
cool.
unlike anywhere.
Is there an ideal time? Because anytime I've had the thought, but I haven't acted on it of going to Seattle, I'm like, when should I go? Like, when can I know that when I go, I'm not going to be dealing with the rain? Like, is there an ideal time of the year?
Yes, I would recommend August or September. Um, yeah, once you kind of get
August,
into
September.
October, it'll start raining a little bit. Um, but August and September are generally going to be the nicest months. The only thing you kind of have to look out for there is if there's any wildfires in the area. Sometimes it can get a little smoky. Um,
Okay.
but overall, that'll be the nicest weather in terms of avoiding the rain or anything like that.
Okay. And I'm just curious because I recently picked up skiing as a southerner just 4 years ago. But I just get a sense, and I can't judge a book by its cover, that you're like a professional, like you're real good at snowboarding. Was that something you got introduced earlier? No.
Um, I did start. So I started out by skiing. My parents made it a point for my brother and I to learn how to ski when we were really young so that we would know
Uh,
how to do it as adults because my dad started young, but my mom didn't. And
okay.
so my mom doesn't ski anymore just because she never really, I don't know, it never really was her thing.
Hmm.
But yeah, so we started out with skiing and then we transitioned to snowboarding when we were in like middle school. So I've been doing
Wow.
it for 20, 25 years now. Um,
Wow. That's
but
impressive.
I did take kind of a break. So I played basketball into college. And so I took a break when I was in college just because I didn't want to get injured snowboarding and then that
Yeah.
impact my basketball career. So yeah, I've been fortunate enough to have done it for a while.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but it's hard to get to the mountains living in Kansas City. But when I go home in the winter, I try to hit the mountains up there. So
Nice. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm
Do you
hitting the
like
mountain.
skiing?
I do like skiing
Yeah.
because since I graduated, my PT, done all that, my journalism, I was like, now's the time for me to like go do the things that I love. So I'm actually going to CSM in February. It's in Boston, but my sister and I, we're gonna go to Vermont for a couple days, and she's gonna snowboard. I'm gonna ski. Obviously, I'm gonna take classes because I like to do that, especially as a beginner.
Yes.
I think I'm on the green blue slope. So I'm coming
Nice.
along. I'm coming along.
Yeah, that's
Well, I
good.
have to do a little twist here because you mentioned basketball. I
Yeah.
love watching basketball, but playing, no. I just
Yeah.
didn't like all the elbows, but I love watching the game itself. How did soccer come into the picture?
Soccer was probably my first love. It was the first sport I started playing as a kid. So yeah, started pretty young, played all the way through high school. Started basketball kind of middle school age, a little bit later,
Mhm.
and think I kind of just got to the point where my basketball skill it just outweighed or it kind of
Yeah,
surpassed what I could do on the soccer field, and so I chose to continue with that into college. I mean, to this day, I miss playing soccer more than basketball. Yeah,
yeah,
I like watching both sports. I think they're both very entertaining.
yeah.
Yeah, and I like supporting kind of my teams in both sports. But
Hmm.
yeah, soccer was first, and
Nice.
yeah, just always been maybe a little bit more passionate about it, but was maybe a little bit better at basketball. So stuck with that for a little bit longer.
Yeah, that's fair. You also attended, so University of Puget, was that where you played basketball as well?
Yeah,
Probably?
yep.
Okay.
Yep. So did my undergrad and then I went to grad school there for PT school. Yeah, so I played basketball there for my first 2 years in college and then decided that I just wanted to be a college student. So
Yeah.
my junior and senior year, I was just a student having fun on campus, studying, trying to get into PT school.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I loved being a college athlete, but it
Yeah.
was nice, like graduate year, like because I attended Mizzou, but I did my undergrad and then also my PT school there. But I got to experience the whole undergrad experience as a graduate student, which was
Yeah.
quite interesting and quite refreshing. Well, I
Yeah.
am curious because it does seem like you had an early vision of the plan to become a physical therapist. How early did that plan come to your mind?
I guess I'm fortunate. I knew since I was 10 years old that I wanted to be a physical
Oh,
therapist. Yeah. When I was in fifth grade, we had to write a speech about what we wanted to be when we grew up.
uh,
And our teachers wouldn't let us pick professional athlete because the chances of that were just slim. And I think they wanted us to kind of start thinking about some other avenues.
mhm.
So I looked into physical therapy, and kind of the more I learned about it, the more I liked it. And a big bonus for me was that PTs didn't have to wear dresses or skirts to work. And that was like, as a 10-year-old tomboy, it was a huge deal. Just I grew up in a household where my dad wore a suit and tie to work every day. My mom was in a dress, skirt, slacks, something
Yeah.
kind of fancy. And I knew I didn't want to do that. So I said, how can I still be around sports and get to dress casual to work and also help people? And it just kind of fell into place.
Yeah. Wow,
So,
that's cool.
yeah,
I totally agree with you regarding to the outfits. I
yeah,
love just wearing
yeah,
something casual because as a journalist, it's like make sure you wear your makeup, make sure you dress
yeah,
up, and sometimes
mhm,
like just chill, you
yeah.
know? And I guess over the years, from 10 years old to obviously being a college student, certainly you learned more about the actual role as a physical therapist. And obviously, once you got through school, you had a better idea. But once you became a clinician, I imagine you had some imaginations of what a PT would look like. But as a new grad, if you can remember, what maybe did you see that you didn't foresee? Maybe some challenges working as a PT that maybe when you're younger didn't really come to mind,
Um, there are
if
probably
any.
two things. Yeah, probably two things that stand out. And one would be just kind of learning about, and because I've always been in outpatient orthopedics in private practice. So in that setting, having to learn about insurance and dealing with kind of the business side a little bit more.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely didn't anticipate that. And especially now being a small business owner, there's a lot more to it than just being a PT.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, the whole business side of it was tried to learn as much as I could early on about that. And then the other thing I think is just I don't know if I anticipated getting to connect with people so much. I think PTs, we are a kind of a unique branch of the healthcare system in that, we see people sometimes up to 3 days a week for it could be, 9 to 12 months. And so the ability to connect with our patients, I think is just a really cool side of it that wasn't necessarily one of the reasons I got into physical therapy, but I think it's a really cool bonus. Yeah, just getting to do that, getting to know people a lot more than maybe a nurse or a doctor that sees their patients once a month, once every 6 months,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
I agree. I love that connection too.
Yeah.
And that connection, I need to first figure out how did the PT connection take you all the way to Kansas City, Missouri?
Yeah. So when I was an undergrad, I met, well, she's my wife now, but at the time, my girlfriend,
Cool.
and
Uh-huh.
she's from the Kansas City area. She actually, hopefully you won't hate me for saying this, but she graduated from KU. So
Oh,
I
no,
know
I'm
we are a
cool.
Jayhawk household, big Jayhawk fans, but no, yeah. So she was in Seattle at the time when I was in school. And so we met through mutual friends. And then it's kind of, she had always anticipated coming back to Kansas City. And
Mhm.
when I finished PT school, I said, yeah, let's do it. So
Let's
we've
do
been in
it.
Kansas City area for over 10 years now. Yeah, so that's kind of how I found myself here.
Okay, well, I need you to, because you're on my podcast, when I see MIZ, say ZOU.
No. Oh man.
Okay, I'm kidding.
I
I'm
don't know if I
kidding. I'm not
can.
gonna do that.
Ugh.
Well, for our listeners, because certainly I like to make sure geography wise everyone's correct in the head. Kansas City, it's Kansas City, Missouri, and there's Kansas City, Kansas, the heart of America. Now, have you been to both sides?
Yes.
Yeah,
Obviously, like the bigger Kansas City, the main Kansas City is on the Missouri side. So
Missouri, guys. Yeah,
yeah, yes. So yeah, I mean, anytime we go downtown or um yeah, obviously we'll be on the Missouri side. And then like Legend Stadium where Sporting KC or Children's Mercy Park where Sporting KC plays, that's on the Kansas City, Kansas side. So
yes.
yeah, so we find
Okay.
ourselves in that area every so
I,
often too. But
so I've never been to the Kansas City, Kansas area. From your experience, what do you think is maybe one of the biggest difference, maybe regarding either, population wise or just the overall culture that you might have experienced there?
obviously the Kansas City, Missouri side is going to be, it has like kind of that downtown feel. It's got, the bigger buildings,
Yeah.
that's where T-Mobile Center is. Yeah, so it's going to have that just, it's not really a big city, but it has that bigger city
Yeah.
feel. Kansas City, Kansas, it's a little bit more, I wouldn't call it truly suburby, but it doesn't have that like metro. Like it's not like the Twin Cities where there's like St. Paul and Minneapolis and they each
Yeah.
have their own downtown and that feel. It's
Okay.
almost like Kansas City, Kansas is yeah, just kind of like
It's
on
just
the
there.
outskirts of downtown ish. And then you get
Yeah.
out into like where Sporting Kansas City plays and there's like an outlet shopping center out there.
From my years in Missouri, it sounds like I haven't missed out on anything, which is great
Yeah,
to.
unless you like good outlet shopping, that's probably the best thing over there in Kansas City, Kansas. But I can't say I've spent a ton of time there either. So
Okay.
yeah, it
Gotcha.
can offer a lot too, but just
Okay.
different.
Well, about Kansas City Current, they announced the expansion in 2020, and you were the first rehab coordinator for the KC Current when they started their first season in 2020, I believe, or 2021. I'm sorry,
21. Yeah.
2021.
Mhm.
First, because you were practicing in the sports clinic for what, 8 years or so before that. How do you think Allison, 8 years after PT school versus maybe a first couple years after PT school, what do you think would be different about that experience if she took on that kind of role as a new grad versus one that's been practicing for a couple or quite at least 8 years or so?
It probably would have been a little disastrous.
Yeah.
In the sense that I kind of came out of PT school with kind of the notion of like, okay, I graduated physical therapy school. I have my doctorate. I know all I need to know, you know?
Yeah.
And so I didn't not ask for help for those first few years, but I might have been a little bit more stubborn just because I wanted to prove that, that I could do it or that I knew enough to get the job done right.
Yeah.
Um, I think fast forward to 8 years later, and even now, it's very much a sense of I feel skilled in my position, but there is so much that I still don't know and want to continue to learn about that I think was huge when it came to kind of being at the professional level because like you're dealing with, especially in the current, like we were dealing with, World Cup players or World Cup winners, gold medalists, Olympic gold medalists. So
Hmm.
it was very much you had to want to elevate your game or really go out there. And if you couldn't find the answer to something, find the people that could or find the information that would provide the answer.
Yeah.
Um, which as a new grad, I was slightly more stubborn on that. I think I might have been sick of studying and learning too for a little bit, just wanted to
Just wanted
be
to do,
a
yes.
PT. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And what did it look like for you when it came to like trying to seek out answers from different places for maybe an athlete that you're trying to rehab their injury?
At at the current, we were fortunate to have some pretty cool connections. Like at one point, the head athletic trainer and I got to have basically like a Zoom call with Holly. in California, the ACL
Oh,
expert. Yeah.
yeah.
So that
Love
was
her. She's
like,
great. Yeah.
yes, that was, we were both sitting there and we're like, oh my God, this is really cool. This is really cool. We're learning from the literal expert on ACLs. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so being with the current, our team physician, he had worked with USA Soccer too. So, getting to learn from Bert Mandelbaum a little bit and kind of be on calls with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just fortunate in that sense to be able to do that at that level.
And I'm going to sidetrack a little bit because I think not every PT may be in the setup where you are at. You obviously were within a professional team, but say that there is a clinician who wants to maybe get a hold of maybe these, clinicians that are expert in a given specific injury. What advice would what advice would you give them regarding to touching base and just seeing what you can get from or hear from these people that have been there and done that?
I would say be persistent. Um, I think that one of the cool parts about physical therapy is that like I feel like we all want to help each other because the better we are as a collective, just the better we can all help people and the better the profession looks.
Yeah.
So yeah, go to their websites, find them on social media and just be persistent, be pesky, or yeah, find out what conferences they're going to be at and approach them there. I mean, CSM is such a great networking, you know,
Hmm.
spot. Just
Yeah.
find the people and start talking to them. Hmm.
Well, back to the rehab coordinating position. So you were first there at the time, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just speaking on my research. At the time, y'all's first inaugural season, y'all were actually playing at a baseball stadium. Can you
Yeah.
tell me what that was like regarding to getting like or having access for equipment for whatever you needed regarding to rehab, or if obviously it wasn't a huge challenge, were the athletes going to your actual work place where you were treating people on a daily basis? What was that like?
So yeah, so the first season, like the current were essentially born in December of 2020, and training camp started in like February of 2021. So essentially, they had about 6 weeks or so to try to get everything together. Um, and I came on kind of midway through that season. But basically, the setup initially was that training happened at it was a local like academy
Mhm.
complex, and so they put a couple of like trailers there that would act as the training room and
Okay.
then the locker room.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so we had a little bit of space there. So that's where some of our rehab equipment was, or majority of the rehab equipment, but it was kind of basic in terms of bikes, bands,
Yeah.
some kettlebells. We had all of our treatment tables, and then anything we would need for treatment in the sense of tape, dry needles, wraps, any of that kind of thing would be in one of those trailers. And then home games were played at I think it's Legends Field actually, where the Kansas City Monarchs play.
Hmm.
Yes, it was a baseball field. So they were extremely generous in that
Yeah.
kind of at the last minute, allowing us to share their space.
Oh.
Um, so we did have, locker room, athletic training set up there. Um, that was so the differences in that season compared to the last couple of
Yeah.
seasons was anytime that we had maybe like a long-term rehab player or a player that wasn't going to play in the game because of injury and they were doing some kind of rehab, we would meet at the stadium a couple hours before players were to report and do their rehab then.
Hmm.
So like I said, the Kansas City Monarchs were nice enough to let us use their field even before our game. And so if we
Okay.
needed any kind of field progressions or anything like that, we were able to do our on-field work before the game. So kind of the medical staff, we would get there early to work with those players, kind of wind down a little bit, and then players would start reporting for the game. So then we'd be ready for the game, do all of that.
Okay.
So yeah, that was the first season. The last couple of seasons, since we have our own training facility now and We were able to play at Sporting's field at Kansas or Children's Mercy Park. Um, Game days were set up that in the mornings, me and the head athletic trainer, and then our performance staff, kind of depending on what stage of the rehab process players were in, we would go to the training facility in the morning and do their rehabs then have kind of a little break in the middle of the day, and then we'd go report to Children's Mercy Park for the game before players started showing up and do. Then we'd only have just game day stuff in that sense. So,
Wow, that was a great layout of what that was like. So trailer time only was for a year, and then after that, you had some very generous stadium or owners that lent
mhm.
y'all these facilities. Now, I do want to ask you because I think at the end of the day, sure, you may have not had all of the equipment readily like available right there in that trailer. But I think that as a clinician, you still have some things that don't change based off of your environment, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
And for you, what were maybe some of those skill sets, or maybe even some things that you learned to be even more flexible when it even came regarding to, taking considerations about treatment or injuries, injury progression within that given space that you were working with?
Yeah, it definitely, I would say definitely forced me to be a lot more creative. Um, but I think that's kind of one of our cornerstones as a profession is, being able to be creative or working in whatever space that we have, just being able to adapt to the situation.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, sometimes it involved maybe I would bring stuff essentially from the training room, from the trailer out onto the field, and we would kind of do stuff out in the open to make it feel just different than being in a trailer.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Because you
or
couldn't sprint,
sometimes
you couldn't sprint in that trailer, could you?
no,
No. Yeah.
no, yeah, it
Yeah.
was very very small space. Yeah, space was limited. So yeah, maybe sometimes it was just okay. We're gonna bring everything outside today so we can get through what we need to get to, or with having enough space to be able to do it. We had to get a little bit creative when it came to scheduling too, in terms of when athletes could come in just because of the space.
And I'm curious, when you started, was it just two of y'all for the medical staff or?
Initially, that first season, there was a head athletic trainer and an assistant athletic trainer, and then I was a part-time employee, and then our massage therapist was a part-time employee. Yeah, the second season I was there, it was the head athletic trainer, assistant athletic trainer, both full-time massage therapist, and then I was still part-time. And then this past season, we added a third athletic trainer. Yeah, so
Okay.
the staff kind of grew each season, which was nice because yeah, it was,
Yeah.
professional level, you need to have the people there to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. So
Yeah, and before we get into kind of your actual role, I want to speak about Kansas City Current because I believe that they might be one of the first women's soccer team that has their own soccer specific stadium. I think is it this year that they're going to be playing in it?
yeah,
CBKC? It is
yeah,
this
it's
year?
set to open in March. Hmm.
Wow. Have you
Yeah.
seen it before? Have you? Probably not, I
I've
imagine.
only driven by and I did
Yeah.
that last summer when they had kind of gotten the skeleton of it up essentially.
Yeah.
I haven't been by it in a while. It's not super close to my house, unfortunately. Um,
Gotcha.
but I mean, everything I've seen online, it looks like it's coming along and it looks awesome.
Yeah. And NWSL has been around, since 2013. And certainly it has been pretty successful, especially with the ownership and so many people buying into, supporting these teams. But what more do you hope to see, from a development standpoint in the NWSL?
I think visibility would be nice. I think that they have a new television contract for this season, and I can't remember who their like networks are, but like previously, games were pretty much only on Paramount Plus. So unless you had a subscription to Paramount Plus, like you couldn't just be scrolling through the channels trying to find a game. Or like there
Yeah.
was one night we went to a sports bar for dinner, and I wanted to be able to watch the current game. I think I can't remember what football game was on too, but they couldn't put the current game up on the TVs because it wasn't on, regular TV.
Yeah.
So I think that would be nice just to have a little bit more visibility in that sense. And then yeah, kind of developing from there. But I'm not that. That's not my my area of expertise by any means. But
I would
yeah,
agree with that. That's the reason why I also have Paramount Plus because
yeah,
that was the only reason that was the only way I could catch some of those games. But it was nice that at least the finals I remember was like on CBS on like a prime
hmm
time. So that was pretty cool a couple
hmm
of years ago. You talked about you being more part-time, being a part-time PT for them. Obviously over the years they added staff. But do you feel that as a PT working part-time um, was the most conducive for the team? Obviously, you have your athletic trainers. Would you have, do you think that PTs maybe could be getting into this full-time role within the team, or did you like that split, going to the clinic, then, coming to the field to treat?
yeah. I had kind of mixed emotions about it. I wanted, for the most part, I would have preferred to have been full time with the team. I think it would have just allowed me to kind of center my focus a little bit more instead of splitting time because I mean, there were days where kind of daily setup for me was I would get there, get up to the training facility with the team anytime between like 6:30 and 7:30 in the morning, start working with players and athletes. I would be there basically until maybe about 2-ish. And then at 2 o'clock, I'd try to go shower really quickly because summers in Kansas City are very hot
Yeah.
and humid. And if I'm not
Yeah.
on the field, kind of running around doing rehabs out there, so I would go try to shower really fast and then leave the facility normally by about 2:30, and then I'd go straight to the clinic. And
Mhm.
I'd be in the clinic anywhere from like 3 to 5 or 6, depending on kind of what my caseload was that day. That was kind of generally what my schedule looked like Monday through Friday. Obviously, I wouldn't be in the clinic on the weekend. So there were days where I felt like I had to kind of rush out of the training facility and try to get to the clinic, which, I mean, the team was my primary focus in that role.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it kind of sometimes I didn't love having to rush out of there while maybe there were still players getting treatment or, something like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I did like still being a part of the community and going to the clinic and working with local high school soccer players or moms of soccer players who would talk to me about how they were so excited for the upcoming current game this weekend or that their young daughter just started playing soccer and loves it now.
Yeah.
So that was definitely fun, still kind of having a pulse on what was going on in the community a little bit
Mhm.
more. Yeah, so
Nice.
I mean it had its pros and cons.
Yeah.
um
Okay.
yeah, some days it was easier than others.
And did you travel with the team?
Rarely. I went
Okay.
on when we made the playoffs in 2022. I got to travel to Seattle for the semifinals and then DC for the final. And then this past season, I got to make a quick trip to Louisville with the
Okay.
team. So for the most part, I would stay back and work with the players that were too injured to play or to travel. That was kind
Okay.
of my primary role.
So then does that mean weekends you were also working?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
if they were home, we would have training on Saturday and generally games on Sunday.
Mhm.
If they were away, it would still be I would go in and work with the rehab players along with one a member of the performance staff. And then this past season, when we had the third athletic trainer, she and I would kind of help handle the rehabs at home while the team was traveling.
I want you to be honest. What was it like working nearly every day of the week?
It's
I mean, I
I'll,
work every day of the week now, but it's still totally different. It's different careers, but
it it's one of the things that led me to deciding to leave the Current at the end of this past season. To be honest, it was just hard. I mean, every weekend, sometimes we'd have like Monday or Tuesday off, and it was I don't know, having Monday or Tuesday. You still can't do much. It's a Monday or a Tuesday, and of
right.
course, my wife would be working, so it just felt like I was missing a lot of other things in my life.
Yeah.
I'm super grateful for the opportunity and the experience that I got there.
Hmm.
It just kind of ran its course for me, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah. And we're gonna again talk about kind of that decision to become an owner. But just from kind of obviously a rehab standpoint, just a couple of questions because oftentimes, as a physical therapist, especially one that either works outpatient, with working with athletes, I think it's still totally different when you're dealing with athletes who are in season and dealing with these injuries because there's some decisions that you have to make during the season. What was the most challenging aspect about managing an injured athlete? And maybe it was one of those injuries that say, like a strain, hamstring or quad, muscular origin.
I would say probably kind of the muscular injuries we try to be a little bit more cautious with. I would say in terms of their return to play timelines, just to ensure that we didn't have any kind of, repeat issues with that. And then, of course, from a medical staff, we are kind of more of the let's play it on the safe side. Obviously, at the professional level, there are different priorities depending on which, department you speak with. It got challenging, and that's where I think kind of having kind of a thorough like return to play test process for injuries was really important because when it came down to it, we could, if a player was ready to play, we could say, okay, they've, checked all of these boxes and they've passed all of these tests. Yes, they're ready. Or, hey, they've done well with these first handful of tests, but we still need these others to get better before we feel comfortable reinserting them into training to eventually start playing again. Yeah, that was kind of what we used, I think, to help guide that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Some of the ankle sprains or some of those were maybe a little bit tougher in that, okay, can we tape it enough? Can we control the swelling?
Hmm.
Can we get through this next week and then we have 10 days off, something like that, depending on what our schedule was.
Yeah.
Those were sometimes a little bit tougher, uh, or yeah, challenging to manage in terms of, again, you've got different interests depending on kind of who you speak to. And, at the center of it, you have the athlete too, of what they want and what they think is healthiest or smartest for them as well. So
Yeah.
it's
And
tough.
what goes through your mind, as you mentioned, you have different personnels that have different ideas of when a player could or should be ready. But what goes through your mind when you are trying to communicate to these people that obviously have roles within the club that aren't necessarily on the medical side, but it's more um, from the playing side, whether that's, the coach or um, uh, the, what do you call it, technical staff,
Yeah.
when they're really
GM.
kind of
Yeah.
questioning, not necessarily questioning you in a way that you don't know what you're talking about, but just questioning to just make sure, are they ready? Can they go? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Are you sure? Are you sure? Yeah. It's those were conversations that our head athletic trainer was involved in much more than I was. She was the head of our department. So, with some of those long-term rehabs that maybe I was involved with, she and I would talk with maybe our high performance director to make sure that we were all on the same page. And then our head athletic trainer and high performance coach would communicate with the technical staff and GM on that front a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, they did a great job of handling that because those were some tough conversations. And I'm kind of glad I wasn't like, in the front row with them yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, very cool. And I do like how you obviously talked about, obviously it's important to have like a progression objectively, being able to test out these things, make sure the athlete progresses nicely. But you obviously mentioned, which is clearly the centerpiece of it, is the athlete. An athlete needs to feel like they're also ready. In your mind, Allison, what final words, spoken or unspoken, did you hope that every professional athlete hear before they took the pitch, especially an athlete who is returning from a long rehab, whether that was an ACL or Achilles?
ooh, that's a good one. I don't know if I have maybe specific phrases or conversations, but I guess it would just go back to like, especially for the long terms, like one, remember all the tests that you passed to get here. Two, if somebody was out for 4 to 6 months or something like that, or even longer, it was, I mean, a long kind of return in terms of just starting with non-contact and training, then going full contact and training and doing that for a set number of weeks before we would consider making them eligible for a game. Um, and so I guess I just hoped that they would kind of think back to, okay, I have done all of this. My body is ready for this next step of being able to, start participating in or, be eligible for game selection. Yeah.
Now that I think about it, I feel like if I were in your situation, I think I'd want them to feel that too, because there's this obviously fear sometimes when you're getting back to this high level that you're expecting and you're like, can I really do this? So yeah, I think I want them to remember like you've tested, you've worked all the way up for
Yeah.
this. I like that. That was a good
Yeah.
response. Well, aside from medicine, because I want to talk about KC Current because you started with them in their first season. I think they finished dead last. The following season made it to the finals.
Yeah.
So I need to understand, obviously, y'all had acquisitions from Sam Mewis, Lynn Williams, other players, but those players actually didn't even play a single minute in that finals run. Can you just tell me what was a shift that you felt during that time? I know it's a kind of maybe a hard question because it's like there probably wasn't one moment, but I'm sure there are big shifts that must have taken place.
I would probably say a big part of it was in June of it would have been June of 2022.
Mhm.
So kind of midway through my second season there, that's when our training facility opened. And at the beginning of that month, or it might have been the very end of May. Anyway, during that time frame, the team went on a 13 game unbeaten streak. And that was like, because prior to that, I think we were maybe around, I think we had a losing record in all honesty. And then to go 13 games unbeaten was obviously huge. And I want to say it either tied the record that was in the NWSL or maybe broke it. I don't know.
Yeah,
Um, but obviously that's a, pretty long time to go without losing a game.
for sure.
Um, and the fact that that happened around the time that we moved into our training facility and had everything that we needed kind of under one roof,
Hmm.
maybe that was, just
Yeah.
kind of that convenience and kind of maybe that peace of mind for the players a little bit more, knowing because prior to that, during that season, we had like trailers at where the training camp or training facility was going to be, but it wasn't finished yet. So we'd have
Yeah.
trailers there. Fields weren't ready yet. So we would commute like 20 minutes across town for training and then drive back to the trailers for, treatments, meetings, meals. So there was a lot of commuting those first maybe 4 months of the season or three
Yeah.
months of the season. And then when we got the training facility, everything was all in one spot. I think it just made life a little
Yeah.
bit easier and things
Less
just clicked
stress.
and it was fun to watch.
Yeah, because I'll be honest with you, I think that season y'all made it to the finals. I was like, I don't think I actually pictured the Current being in the final that year because I guess from the previous year, I was like, they just are starting up, So I was like, give them a couple more years.
Mhm.
From a medical standpoint, what was first your most memorable game to be a part of? And then kind of take me through, what you experienced, as a medical professional during that finals. Even though y'all did lose, it was still set, I'm sure it was still a great time to have gone so far in a league that's very competitive.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty remarkable indeed. So, I would probably say my favorite game that season, I'm going to be a little biased on this, but the semifinals, that season we played at Seattle at OL
Yes.
Reign.
Uh-huh.
And so it was the first time that I had traveled with the team on a road trip.
Hmm.
And so I was just super excited to, get to go along. And of course, to go to all places but Seattle, my home.
Yeah,
So it was
of
great to go back.
course.
My parents were actually able to come to the game, so I got to see them for a little bit.
Yeah.
We won 2-0. I
Yeah.
mean, the game took place in what's it? I can't where
Trying
the
to think.
Seahawks play. I can't remember the name of
Yes.
the stadium off the top of my head right now, but it's where the
Uh-huh.
Seahawks play. So,
Yeah.
the Seahawks, my NFL team, I was standing on that same field.
Yeah.
It was remarkable. And
That's
really
awesome.
fun to be at that game. And then, yeah, at the finals the next week was awesome too.
What emotion did you or do you remember feeling just being a part of that moment?
Just grateful. Yeah, just super grateful and kind of still in shock or in awe a little bit of just being there. I
Yeah.
didn't expect that at all. And so it was just fun to play a small part in everything that the team had accomplished that year.
Yeah, and I want to tie it back to the medical profession, being a, medical provider, whether you're a PT or you're a doctor. How do you think such an experience like that, going from being dead last to first, how do you think that also can translate to a clinician regarding to the way that they view themselves when it comes to trying to, one, become the very best that they can, but also when it comes to when you don't necessarily know it all and maybe you have your struggling moments where you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I do next?
If I'm thinking about the first part of your question, when the team is doing well like that in terms of how it feels to be a medical provider in that situation, it kind of gives us maybe a sense of confidence a little bit, or maybe that's kind of how I felt that year we had unfortunately some season-ending injuries. We didn't have a ton of situations where players missed maybe one or two games. Earlier in the season, we did a little bit, but by the time we got to kind of June and July, most of our players stayed healthy for the rest of the season. So, like, I don't want to say like it wasn't a false sense of confidence by any means, but it was okay. Players are staying on the field. The team's successful. Hopefully, there's a correlation there. And I
Yeah.
would probably say that most people would argue that. So it was, there was maybe less of a spotlight on us. Yeah, because people were fortunately staying healthy. And again, the team continued to win. So it feels good.
And I like how you mentioned the spotlight because it's like an athlete can, and this is just real life. An athlete can be doing good, but no one's going to say, "Hey, the PT." I mean, sure, yes, they might reach out, but it's oftentimes when things aren't going so well, there's more questions being asked, which is
Yes.
fair because we need these
Mhm.
athletes to be healthy. Well,
Mhm.
I love how Kansas City Current they have this saying, and I'm going to read it word for word. It says, "We are a river, a current rushing relentless momentum." And I just felt this sense of power when I was reading that. But that momentum see, my Spanish is kicking in. I have a hard time saying momentum in Spanish. But anyways, that momentum has certainly taken you on another adventure to become the business owner for Game Changer. Obviously, you mentioned, being busy, not busy, but, working throughout the whole week, kind of took a toll, but how did that plan come to mind originally?
Yeah, I have kind of thought about starting my own business, my own physical therapy company for a while, even before I was working with the Current. And then obviously the opportunity with the Current came along, and that was also one of my dreams. And so had to take
Okay.
advantage of that. And then, yeah, so from there, this season just kind of being, or this past season, just being kind of as difficult as it was, and the long hours started to get to me. And I think I kind of realized that I didn't necessarily want to work for anyone anymore. I wanted to work for me, which, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe good or bad. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and since I'd kind of been thinking about it for a while, and it just kind of felt like the right time to
The right
transition to
time.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, my goal with Game Changer is I want to continue working with female athletes, soccer players, ACL athletes. What I had at the Current, I want to continue doing that as much as possible. And
Hmm.
like I said, just the experience, the knowledge that I gained at the Current, I want to bring that to the community as much as I can. Yeah, Kansas City's kind of a hub for soccer, so
Yeah. It's
just
a
feels like it,
big,
it
big
fit
city.
right.
And you talked about wanting it to be a place, obviously, athletes, females, ACL. Is it just females or is it everyone that you
It's
see?
everyone.
Oh,
It's
okay.
everyone. Yeah, I've had obviously just a little bit more experience working with female athletes at the professional level, but yes, everyone is welcome.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And it opened last year or this year?
It opened like a week ago. Yeah, I'm kind of a
Oh,
week and a couple days
wow.
into it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So still pretty fresh, but getting the hang of things a little bit.
Well, I'm excited. I'm always excited to recommend because obviously I went to school at Missouri and oftentimes it's nice to know of PTs in different states of where I'd
Yeah.
recommend them to go. Where is Game Changer located? Is it Kansas City, Kansas or Kansas City, Missouri?
It's on the Kansas side in a
Okay.
in a suburb, Lenexa. Yeah, it's kind of fun. I'm located within a performance gym. So the guy that I lease from, he owns a performance company called A Greater You that works primarily with soccer and basketball players.
Uh-huh.
And so it's a nice nice big open space with turf fields. There's soccer goals in here. There's, weight racks, all the exercise and gym equipment that I would need, and then lots of space. And then I kind of have my little treatment room here, but
Yeah.
get to share that space with them. So I feel pretty fortunate to be where I am.
Very cool. And so far, I know it's very early, but what has been maybe a joy and one tough aspect about ownership so far?
A joy, I think, would be there's a handful of patients that followed me. And so, one, I love that I get to continue working with them.
That's great.
But two, it makes me feel a little bit like I am going to be okay doing this, that,
Yeah.
yeah, that things will work out. So those are probably the most exciting thing. The hardest parts, or the most challenging thing, just trying to get the business side of it. Like how many hoops I had to jump through just to even get the doors open.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, it is what it is, and it's just
Yeah,
something I
yeah.
need to get used to and learn to deal with. But it took a while to get through some of those things. So
Yeah. And I figured that would have probably been the
yeah,
hardest part. Just not that I'm a business owner, but it
yeah,
speaks to your personality because I do think that entrepreneurship, business owners, it takes a special mind, a special personality to do that and to kind of risk, right? For
yeah.
something greater. What, if anything, do you hope that people remember about Allison?
Whew. I hope that they remember that they enjoyed working with me, that
Yeah.
they either had fun, like at some point in the rehab process, or just had fun interacting with me and felt comfortable, like knowing that I was going to help them get better, help them get to their goals. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
great. I like that.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think sometimes people don't realize just having fun. Obviously, you're there for therapy, but just having fun in whatever you're doing at a given moment, that is
Mhm.
such a beautiful thing. So, I tell you what, when I'm in Missouri, which I will be probably not next year, maybe this year, maybe
Okay.
I will have to come by your
Yes.
place, even if you're
Yes.
treating, at least to pop in, do a little
Yes.
clip so I can
Yes.
tell people about my place that I'm gonna definitely send people your way. Thank you for your time, and
Thank
I
you.
think this will be so great for people also to kind of see what it's like from working as a clinician, transitioning to work professional, but then still finding a way to pursue your passions, which now is becoming a business owner. So
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really great. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you again.
thank you so much, so much from the bottom of my heart for stopping by, tuning in. Don't forget, rate, give me some feedback because as always, we want more great episodes to come your way.